by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Yes, every high school student, especially at a good school, should read it. If the student doesn't read it, I think the student's being cheated. At the peak of, I'm not an expert at all on novels, and especially American novels. I don't read novels much. I think I've read the major ones, but normally it doesn't interest me much. But The Great Gatsby is certainly a good one. Also in American literature, Catcher in the Rye. I'll talk about that sometime. I think that's even better. There's Scarlet Letter, Moby Dick, things, 19th century things. Okay. 20th century novels. I've read a few, like The Color Purple, which I thought was minor stuff. So I'm not well read. Faulkner, but I don't see the greatness myself. Hemingway, I don't see greatness in the novels at all. In the short stories, yes. Okay, The Great Gatsby. Fitzgerald was from the Midwest, and this novel, in a sense, is about somewhat innocent Midwesterners going east, going to the Big Apple, so to speak, and to the big, the most prestigious universities, big money too. The novel is situated in the 1920s. Now, it helps to know about the 1920s a little bit. It helps a lot, in fact. And a little about Fitzgerald, too. Again, he was from the Midwest. Illinois, maybe, I'm not sure. Or maybe Michigan. Then he went to Princeton. And that, of course, was a huge experience. His family didn't have much money, and he came into contact at Princeton. I don't know what high school he went to, maybe a private school. In any case, relatively early, he came into contact with big, old money. Old meaning old families, established families, families who had had money for maybe at least a couple of generations. And Fitzgerald, as he himself confessed, never got over his infatuation with this phenomenon, let's say, this social phenomenon, big old money. And he always wanted to be a person of that kind. It drove him. He was a driven man, but I think, in a sense, he misunderstood some things. Maybe he realized that he was misunderstanding things. But okay, now 1920s, the Roaring Twenties, we call them. Now you must remember that World War I, 1914 to 18, had been a pretty ghastly affair, but the U.S. had spent relatively little time in it. It began in 1914, the terrible trench warfare between especially the British and the Germans. Remember, too, there is no bad guy in World War I. But after World War I, we produced the bad guy, I think. But I'll explain that some other time. That doesn't concern us now. The U.S. reluctantly got into the war finally in 1917, and it was over in 1918. Then began this era of great rising prosperity, but that decade, the 1920s, is also marked by what we call Prohibition. That was an amendment to our Constitution which prohibited alcohol. Well, it's remarkable that a country would even try to prohibit alcohol. And I wonder what the wise heads were thinking when assuming they too voted for such legislation, What were they thinking? Were they thinking people would stop drinking? That's absurd. Then they certainly foresaw that this would generate many illegal operations, and this would be involved with a world of crime, big crime on a very large scale, and various other things. Well, of course, all this happened. So the 1920s is the era of a rising prosperity with huge fortunes made by some, and Prohibition and the criminal element which provided the alcohol, distributed it. All of this required some sophistication and some coordination, some know-how, all that. Good times, we say, but one wonders when that expression is used of kind of frantic partying. Is frantic partying good time? Maybe. Depends on the individual. I don't mind it. I like it. But the truth is, it's always a little forced, and memories of it are very dim, not very clear, and it assumes a certain unreality. And I think that's captured in the book pretty well, too. Okay, the main character is Nick. I forget Nick's last name, but doesn't matter. Nick, who clearly seems to be Fitzgerald himself. From the Midwest, had attended a famous prep school, I guess. I don't think it's even named. Andover, maybe. And then had attended Princeton. At Princeton, he had met, among others, Tom Buchanan. Tom Buchanan, also from the Midwest, old family money. Lots of it. Easy life, easy pleasures. I'll describe Tom first, because he's easier to describe. Tall, athletic, powerful, tanned, well-dressed, of course, the polo player, and therefore the horseman, the sports car driver, with a stable of horses and a stable of sports cars, a house on Long Island where the action takes place, near New York City, but of course houses elsewhere too. Now, Nick, much less money, not money really, just middle class, has to work for a living. Tom does not. Has to be careful of his expenditures, watch his budget, things like that. So, third main character, I'll discuss Gatsby last, though he's the most important, though maybe Nick. Anyway, the third main character, Daisy Buchanan. Daisy is married to Tom now when the action begins. Also, old money, and a lot of it. Daisy was from Louisville, Kentucky, so kind of Midwest, that direction. And Daisy is related, second cousin something, to Nick, our narrator, the storyteller. Okay, fourth main character, let's say Gatsby. J. Gatsby. Well, Gatsby isn't even really his real name. Much later in the novel, we learn that he changed his name, falsified all kinds of things about his story. He now has, or seems to have, a lot of money, renting a huge house in Long Island, or on Long Island, and it turns out this huge house, where the partying is daily, large expenditure, is located right next door to the place that Nick has rented, but Nick has rented the servant's house nearby, but he can hear the partying at Gatsby's. And it turns out that the Buchanans have rented a house not too far away, a few miles away, also on Long Island, for the summer. There's one other almost major character, Jordan. Jordan is a woman. She's a professional golfer. She's kind of like Nick. Excuse me. And they have a brief affair. Like Nick in the sense that she is not from a family with the big money, but she likes to hang around with the people with the big money. She's a pro golfer, and so kind of an elegant existence, tanned and beautiful, and used to the fast parties and the fast company. Fast means moving fast, means having whatever they want, getting whatever they want. Party animals, as we would say, but party animals in the modern sense, for you guys going where there are party animals to the schools in the United States, public or private. Party animal is an expression that connotes, C-O-N-N, sloppy, kind of messy. The Buchanans and Jordan and Nick are not messy. It gets a little messy sometimes, but mostly not messy. They drink too much and then it gets a little messy. But different creatures, mostly because of the money, the big, big money. Okay, so Nick, in a sense the story is about Nick. From this point of view, it's the genre could even be called a Bildungs Roman, just like Great Expectations of Dickens, and like many, many novels of the 19th and 20th centuries. You'll recall a Bildungs Roman, German word, Roman meaning novel, is a novel about the formation of the character of someone, usually the narrator. Pip in Great Expectations, now Nick in Great Gatsby. In this sense, he learns something, and he does learn something, and he's changed by it. Most Bildungsromane, Romane, plural, take place over a fairly long period of time. This one takes place over a short period of time, just really a summer. So it's peripherally, on the outskirts kind of, peripherally a Bildungsroman. Okay. The novel begins. Nick describes that summer. He had rented a small house. He's a witty guy, a little bit witty in a sarcastic way. And he describes briefly the house, the location of the house on Long Island. He's living there because he has a job in Manhattan that he's glad to have. In short, he's trying to make a career, and he commutes into Manhattan every day. Okay. The big house, the huge house within 100 yards, clearly visible from his house, the Gatsby house, the large, huge parties every night. Now Gatsby had come over in one of his sports cars, dressed just like Tom Buchanan would dress. That's how he wants to dress. That's how he wants to be. He wants to be a Tom Buchanan, really.